Welcome to another edition of the Golden House on Silver Street podcast and YouTube channel. We are so excited that you've joined us today. I'm Christine Gannon here with my brother John Barbieri, and today we have special guest with us, author Christopher LaPrath, who has written an amazing book called Trestle Creek, Things the Dead Fear. Chris, welcome.
Thank you both so much, Christine and John.
Yeah,
It's a
welcome.
privilege to be here. I'm thrilled. Having seen your book, I noticed that there's a lot of similarities. We were talking about that a little earlier before you started recording.
Yes, I can't wait to dive into that. A little bit about the book, and then I'd love your perspective. Chris is a devout man whose life is unraveling. He's well respected in his church, and by all appearances, a great family man. But something is wrong within. Chris knows he needs some help. Through a chance meeting with a strange and mysterious couple, Chris begins to receive that help, but help that is far from conventional. He's transported back in time, forced to look at his childhood surrounded by spirits, both from the angelic and demonic realm. So Chris, welcome. Tell us a little bit about you and the book and what prompted you to write it.
Well, thank you so much. What prompted me to write it was transformation and what is capable with us as humans, that we can transform our lives. Okay. And in order to do that, we have to see the unseen and being open to what else is out there. I have a master's degree in human dynamics. I have a bachelor's in communications, another degree in psychology. And I'm fascinated with what we really see, but also what we can't see. Let me tell you about that. I mentioned this on a talk show the other day. We know that there's 1.2 million species on Earth that we know of, but there's 7 million that have been undiscovered. It's estimated 7 million species that are in the physical realm that we don't know about.
Wow.
So how much more in the unseen realm, where we only see 2% of the electromagnetic spectrum, right?
Right.
And so that spectrum includes the far infrared, the ultraviolet, and there's all these things in between. So I was raised in this house in northern Idaho. And there were things that began to happen because my family was in so much fear at the time. They always explained it as natural phenomena, right?
Sure.
And so we didn't really have the doorknobs to hang new concepts on.
Ah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. And so the book is about this unraveling and opening up to new concepts of what species are out there within that spiritual realm. And as a child, you don't have the constructs that you do as an adult, where these
Right.
constructs or belief systems are built and stacked, and and then you have this box kind of what and you live in that box. So as a child, when I would tell my parents things that I saw, they would just go, "Oh, go play. He has an active imagination." And it wasn't until that I started going to school in first and second grade, and I went and told my classmates what I was seeing, that then they went home to tell their parents, whose then parents called the school to complain, right? And to this day, that whole area of Idaho knows about this house from generations of these stories being passed down that I really had no idea. right? That it was out of the ordinary.
What happened that really triggered, there's only so many times you can tell a child to go play, but what in your memory that is something that happened that really let you know something really was awry? It wasn't your imagination.
Well, we would hear footsteps. I mean, it would be footsteps to where the house was falling apart. It sounded like the roof was caving in. They were so loud across the upstairs, right? These knocks on the door, again, that sounded like the house was caving in. And then, of course, no one would be there when we go to the door. And the one turning point, the biggest turning point, and I don't mean to spoil the end of the book, but there was one
Spoiler
point.
alert, spoiler alert. Turn it off. You don't want to know the end.
Since you asked, it was 1963, and I was walking by the picture windows, and I looked outside, and in the yard was my grandfather.
I just read
Sitting
that
there.
this morning, yeah.
Huh?
I just read that part this morning.
Yeah. He was sitting there in the, oh, good. So it's not a spoiler for you, John.
No.
But he was sitting in the yard, and I went and told my mom. I said, Mom, Grandpa's here.
He had passed away though, right? He's long past.
But wait.
Okay.
That's what I'm getting to. I'm getting to it. Okay, it's good. All right. So I go and I tell my mom, and she goes, go play. He's in Nebraska. He's not here. That's just your imagination. And so 5 minutes later, the phone rings, and it was my aunt who told my mom that their father had passed away. And that was a turning point to me, because to this day, I still recall, I vividly saw him. And a year ago, February, this month, my brother called me, and he'd been ill for a long time. And he said, hey, I just wanted you to know that Grandpa was here in my room last night.
Wow.
And I said, Chuck, what do you think that means? And he said, I don't think I have very much longer left. And I said, well, Chuck, I think you're right. And so we were able to say goodbye, told we loved each other. And just a few days later, he passed away. So there are these events and these people that have passed, and events that happen to us that are beyond our maybe limited thinking, because we don't have the doorknobs or the neuroplasticity or the roadways in our brain to grasp something new like that. But as a child, you're much more open to that.
Yeah. Chris, I've heard so many stories like that. I truly believe that's, I would love to find out, at the end, what do people get, like that little bit of free time at the end to go and say goodbye? Because I've heard so many stories of exactly things like that happened to you with your grandfather that have happened to other people. Almost exactly, where they see someone and then they find out, an hour later that person had passed on. My girlfriend is a ICU nurse, and she's got tons and tons of stories of people that on their way out, they say they see their mother, or that their brother has come into the room and that nobody's there, obviously. Or, people have passed, and the nurses, they had one where a woman had passed. She was on her way to a different hospital, and the call button went off in the room that she was in. There was nobody in that room, and all of a sudden the call button goes off, or it sends a code for that she's going into code blue. And that's still one that just gives me chills. I'm like, oh, that woman was long gone. So I really agree 100% with what you're saying, that everything that's going on, we don't have a clue what's going on these different frequencies that we're not in tune with. Some people are lucky enough, like yourself, that can maybe tune in a little bit better than others can. But I think like what you're saying with, pushing it off as natural phenomenon. My mother and my dad and brother and everybody went through that same thing where, at first, just I think it's human nature that we try and control our environment and say, oh, well, try and explain it in whatever way we can use to explain it. Our mother had in her house when she first moved in, it was doors slamming. Like all the doors in the house would slam shut all of a sudden. And when I was reading your book, when your two dogs, Trixie and Swatsy, is that it?
Yeah.
When they went to the door and started barking, I think it was the door to the attic, or maybe
The upstairs.
yeah, I called Christine, and told her, I said, that's exactly what happened to Mom and Mike, because our mom and our dad were in the room, in one of the family room, and the first indication they ever had that something was otherworldly were puppies that went to the wall and just started going crazy staring at the wall, barking. And there's so many similarities through your story and our mother's story that just it's. I think if once you read our book, you'll be saying the same thing. It's just like, oh yeah, that sounds so familiar, and it's really sort of neat that those things happen very similarly.
Yeah, these commonalities, right?
Right.
Like you take animals, their spectrum along that electromagnetic spectrum is much broader, right?
Mm-hmm.
They see things, they hear things that we don't. It's not within our spectrum. So for me, this is the passionate about meeting both of you, and the work that you do is really important to get this consciousness out there. There are universities, even here in Arizona, right? You've got the University of Arizona that has the Veritas program. I'm sure you've heard about that, where
Let's talk about that. What is it?
They study consciousness. I mean, you can Google it, right?
Okay.
And the afterlife. Dr. Schwartz is head of it down there. He's written a couple of books on it. They've done back-to-back studies on it. But there's universities around the world. University of Saskatchewan has another study of the afterlife, right? I mean, I can go on and on. I won't talk about that. But if you can just look it up, and then the different cultures, I wanted to talk about that Iceland has elves in their constitution. Iceland protects elves through their constitution. That's how real it is for them. So culture has a lot to do with it. So having been raised in this haunted house, I was told as I got older that these things were from the devil. So I'm like, oh no, okay, all right, that must be true, because an adult told me that, right? And they're 3 feet taller than I am, so they're basically like giants that tell you, okay, this has got to be true. So I joined a religion, right? And ended up going to China as a missionary, the Republic of China. And that was another culture that was 180 degrees different than ours, where if you watch the movie Mulan, right? I know that's Japan, but Mulan is about the animated feature is where she goes and she talks to her ancestors and they talk back to her, right? That's a whole nother culture. So I find I'm very passionate about helping our culture expand that consciousness, right? That scientifically based, like even quantum physics said, if you can imagine it, Christine, John, if you can imagine it, it has to exist.
Yeah.
So I get excited about it.
Yeah. I'm going to look that program out. Was it Veritas? Said?
Yeah, V as in Victor, ERITAS.
Okay. Yeah.
University of Arizona.
I'll look that up. I'm interested in that. Very much.
I think his name is Dr. Gary Swartz is his name.
Okay. Now,
So
you had mentioned about delving more into consciousness and the things that we don't know and we don't see. Now, before you had met the couple of Barb and Scott that you mentioned in the book, had you ever had any exposure to that type of thinking or that therapy model or anything like that before you met them? Or was all that brand new for you?
I just, I stuffed it, right? So I put a cap on it.
Okay.
So I had a 25,000 square foot house on the River Denial.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
we all own riverfront property on that. It's
Right. So that's where it was just, if there was something that I couldn't put my head around, I just put it in the box and shut the lid, right? I was like, no. And then it was very easy for me to go, okay, this is from the devil, this, so we don't look at that.
Right.
So it was kind of an easy way out. But then there were just, after you stuff the box so much, then I began to get more and more angry, more and more depressed.
Sure.
And I was looking for a way out, and that's what I talk about in the book. Because
Okay.
the brain actually does not do time. So you can recall an event from 20 years ago, John,
Sure.
and instantly those emotions are there, the details are there, and it's like it's happening right now. So time is really a construct, right? It's not really real. Because even our brain, in recalling an event from 20 years ago, can bring up those emotions, those feelings, those memories.
So yeah, right. Even the smells, right? I know
Right.
a lot of emotions you have that, and you could smell. I know if I think back, just one memory, just I'm picking out random. I can smell my friend's kitchen where my mother cooked. If I think of that memory, I can be transported there. You're very, very right.
Yeah.
No,
And the olfactory bulb, the thing that in the nose that does the smelling, is part of the limbic system. Limbic system controls emotions and memory. So if you are in a bad mood, angry, sad, depressed, I tell my clients, hey, go to the cupboard, take your cinnamon out and just smell it, or your thyme, or your basil, because it will help you snap out of that.
Really?
Yeah. So that's just one of those little easy fixes that can help you get out of that looping.
All right, I'm trying that later today.
So, Chris, in your book, I wanted to read something for our listeners quickly here and have you comment on it. In your book, you're talking about Barb, and she's speaking here in this part of it. And Barb and I think it was Scott helped you on this journey of really understanding some of the things that transpired and really helping you to delve a little bit deeper. And Barb says many people, if not most, feel shut out and shut off, out of touch with life. They externalize everything that happens to them as someone else's fault or just bad luck. What if people got what they wanted free of manipulation or being manipulated? The people in society are programmed to be chameleons. We are conditioned to listen to teachers, doctors, parents, military, donors, or anyone in the know, like you said, anyone in the know, like a parent. People then begin to repeat, believe, and act upon what the authority figure says. So if a certain authority figure tells us that a certain race, creed, or religion is bad, we may take up arms and become that chameleon and accept it as truth. What if a parent told us we're stupid or never met their expectations? From an authoritative figure, we could take that into our consciousness and adopt that belief, even though it's not who we truly are. I think that's what you were talking about a little bit ago in terms of accepting something from an authority figure as truth, like that's from the devil, when in reality, it wasn't reality.
Exactly. And so it's what is truth to you? Okay. And not to have anyone put a cap on that truth.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, I love that part of the book because it's about thinking for yourself. And you knew, as you were growing up, things were not right. And even though you were told to go play, you knew things were awry. And even the school, right? Calling and telling you know, all these things that transpired in the book related to you growing up, where you're shunned or people thought it was wrong or a lie or you're crazy. Those were all authoritative figures saying that versus you on this journey for truth. So tell us a little bit about the journey with Barb and Scott, if you feel comfortable, in terms of how did that transform and change you? Maybe briefly, because I'm sure there's probably
Here.
content.
So let me back up and tell you a quick story. A couple of years ago, I went to dinner with my friend who I've known for 15 years. We sat down at a restaurant, and Christine, I looked at his head, and the left side of his head was completely bashed in, and there was blood everywhere. And I freaked out. And he saw the look on my face. He goes, "What is wrong?" And I said, "The left side of your head is completely bashed in, and there's blood everywhere." And he looked at me and he goes, "How do you know about that?" He said, "I never talk about that. I've never told anybody about that." I go, "John, it's coming up for a reason." He told me, he said, 45 years ago, he was walking through Papago Park with a girl here in town. He was jumped by 3 guys. He only had a dollar on him. He was only 19 years old. And they took a tire iron and bashed in the left side of his head. Okay. And they left him for dead. They left the girl for dead. I won't go into it anymore, but it was really gruesome. But from that, it was very hard for him to have relationships. Okay. Because the brain went on survival. So when the brain perceived that it was about to have another relationship, the brain goes, "Hey, John, remember what happened the last time you were in a relationship, or you were alone with a woman? Yeah, you almost died, and yeah, the girl almost died, and yeah, you want that again, huh? You want more of that?" And then John would go, "Whoa." The brain's number one job is to protect us. So belief systems, right? Belief systems we adapt in order to protect us, and they were appropriate for the time that we adapted them. Okay. I call it the red dress syndrome. I think I talk about it in the book, where you're walking down the street and you're having a great day and it's sun shining and it's beautiful. And there's this woman in a red dress, and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, I want to kill somebody." You know, and you're angry and you're depressed. But consciously, you don't remember that maybe when you were 3 years old, your mother beat you when she was wearing a red dress. So again, we was talking about that brain doesn't do time. So how Barb and Scott helped me is their son actually became a neuroscientist. Okay, and I went to see him. I'm like, why am I seeing these spirits? Why am I seeing the left side of this guy's head bashed in? Another real quick story. I was reading for this woman, and I'm like totally confused. I said, "My dear," I said, "how come your daughter's dead but alive? She's dead and then she's alive? I don't get it." And the woman started bawling. She goes, "I know what that is." She said, "When my daughter was 3 years old, she comes running into the bedroom. She goes, 'Mommy, I'm going to use your bathroom.' Oh, and Mommy, I'm not mad at you anymore." And the woman goes, "What do you mean you're not mad at me anymore?" And the little girl goes, "When you flushed me down the toilet, I'm not mad at you anymore. But when I went down the toilet, there was a man that caught me on the other end, and I came back, and I'm not mad at you anymore."
Whoa.
So this woman is bawling, right? About a year before this daughter was born, she'd given herself an abortion.
Wow.
And flushed the baby down the toilet.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And then the daughter somebody was there to catch the daughter, right? And then the daughter came back.
Wow.
For whatever reason, that she had lessons to learn, soul contract, whatever that was. But my point is that when I went to see this neuroscientist, he took all these tests with me, and I go back and he walks in the room, Christine, and he goes, "Okay, Chris, be honest with me." I went, "Okay, all right." He goes, "How much LSD do you take every day?"
What?
I go, "Exactly." I went, "What?" And I go, I cannot take drugs. I can't even hardly have a glass of wine. He goes, "All right." I go, "Why?" He said, "Because your brain functions like somebody that's on LSD constantly. But the weird thing is, you control it." He said, "Everyone's neurons fire one direction. Yours fire both directions all the time, like you're on LSD, but you control it. And your parietal lobe is developed at over 200% above what we consider as the normal range. Parietal lobe is part of the brain that does the sensing and feeling." Okay. So to answer your question, I know I went the long way around, Christine, but Scott and Barb helped me to understand that it's building the neural pathways in the brain and how to do that. Okay. Another great, if you even just YouTube brain gyms, GYMS, these are exercises that help to build the neural pathways in the brain. This is one of the exercises. You're doing left and right brain integration. Right brain controls left side of the body, left brain controls right side of the body. So this one helps to build neural connections between those two areas of the brain, which then help to build the roadways or the pathways so that you can put new concepts on those roadways.
That's very,
Fascinating.
yeah. I've actually, when you were mentioning, that your friend's reaction to relationships, that survival mode or whatever it took over was appropriate at that point in time, but he still held on to it. And I've read a lot about that, and I'm very interested in that, doing self-help type stuff where I feel that I don't think as humans we really understand without training how to clean house in our memory, and not just the memory, but that where we do have those reactions, our brain takes over and we have certain reactions to certain situations, and we just hold on to that, and we don't realize that it affects us so far down the line. Like, I truly think that there's stuff that I experienced maybe when I was a teenager that still affects the way I think today. And I'm always looking for ways to, how do we clean house? How do we live in the moment type thing? But that's very interesting. Let me ask you, is Scott and Barb, are they still around? They still do?
They are. I still work with them. Yeah, they have a clinic. Like, they have a clinic here in Phoenix, in North Scottsdale, and I have an office in their office.
Oh, good.
Even though I don't go there much because of COVID, we do pretty much, as you know, everything on Zoom.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're very much around. She works with the masters in Bhutan and Tibet. They actually fly here to the United States to see her, for her to work on them.
Wow.
Okay. So she has done amazing, amazing work.
Yeah, I'll have to look into. Have they written books and everything? Are people just able
No,
to find them on the internet?
They're not on Facebook. They're not on Instagram. They're not on social media. They don't have a website. It's all word of mouth.
Okay.
So that's how they work with Olympic teams. They work with people from all over the world will fly in, but it's all just been known word of mouth. And it's like you're directed, right? It's like the teacher will appear when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So Chris, what do you do for our listeners? I know that you're located in Arizona, and I'm sure that we have listeners who are not in Arizona who might be interested to contact you, but more so than your contact info, what kind of services do you provide with all that you've learned in the journey that you've been on? How do you serve today?
Well, my website is ChristopherLaPrath.com. And when people go there, Tony Tony Felice and the Felice Agency came up with this brilliant concept that when people book a reading and they do it through that website, ChristopherLaPrath.com, I don't know who they are. They're given a number by the Felice Agency. So I don't know anything about them until I turn on the computer and the Zoom. Then I get their name, I get their birth date, that type of thing, and the reading commences. Okay. And that's even with people that I know. I never do any social media research, but Mr. Felice thought this was extremely important that people knew I wasn't doing pre-research on that person. Okay. And so that's why I don't really know any, especially with new people that are coming in, I don't know anything about them other than a number. And there's no way that I can do research on them before the reading. Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of experiences. You watched the Super Bowl, right? And you've seen the Dorito commercials, right? Well, I got on a plane a few years ago, and it was from Florida to Phoenix here. And there was this really pretty girl. I was sitting on the aisle seat. She excused herself. She went and sat at the window seat. And the plane took off, and this old woman is standing beside me in the aisleway. And she's like screaming at me, "Tell her to lose that guy. Tell her to lose that guy." And I'm like, oh my dear God. So I turned to the woman. I said, "Ma'am, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm so tired. I don't care if it sounds crazy. Your grandmother's here. She's telling me to tell you to lose that guy." And the girl burst into tears. And she said, "I said a prayer this morning that I would have an unequivocal sign as to whether I should break it with my fiance of 4 years or not." Right?
Pretty good sign.
Yeah, right? So I don't know why I brought that up, but that story it had to do with your question, I think. Oh, about how they. So I don't. When it comes, it comes. Like there's, if the person has a message that's necessary to get through, and usually if they book an appointment with me, they subconsciously or somewhere in the area know that they have a message that they need to hear.
So what are your services, Chris, that you offer for our listeners who don't know what a reading is and don't know what your services are? What are your services?
Well, I use cards, even though I don't need them. I use like cards because it helps the person focus on the cards rather than on me or me focusing on them, staring at them. It's very uncomfortable. So that's how I do it is I sit down with a person. It's an hour to an hour and a half consultation, and what the highest priority is, right? It's like chunking down things. You have to start with what is the highest priority with a person. And it may be a message from a loved one that has passed, but it may be from an anonymous messenger, because the messenger may not be the important. It's the message that's important that that person needs to hear.
Sure. Okay.
So how can they find you, Chris? If people are interested, we know they can find your book, Trestle Creek, on Amazon and also on your website. How else can they find you?
So it's my website, ChristopherLaPrath.com. That's probably the best way. I have a couple of videos on there. I need to change them, but they're a little bit older, but it tells a little bit about what I do and how I do it. You're able to book an appointment on the website as well. And really one quick story. 13 years ago, a girl comes to me, it was on a Saturday, and she goes, "I'm quitting my job on Monday. Should I quit my job on Monday?" And I'm like, "Well, you're pregnant." She goes, "I am not." And I go, "Yeah, you are." She's like, "No, I'm not." I went, "Yeah, no, yeah, right." So she gets mad and she pays me. Well, 7 months later, I said, you're pregnant. It's going to be a little girl and it's going to be premature. So 7 months later, I get this phone call from this woman. And she goes, hey, my whole family from Dallas is here. Can you come read for them? I'm like, who is this? Like, you told me I was pregnant. She goes, I left the place, the reading, and she went and got a pregnancy test. Guess what? She was pregnant, right? And it was a little girl, 2 months premature. And so her whole family came in. Well, I never answered her question as to whether she should quit her job or not. And she was mad at me for that at the time. But obviously, she didn't quit her job on Monday. She's now an executive for a huge corporation. She helps to oversee 150,000 people. Okay. And this is, of course, 13 years later. But I said, Amanda, looking back, what would you have paid for that reading? She goes, if I had known what it was going to lead to, I would have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for that reading because it saved me millions. Her hospital bill were in the millions.
Wow.
Because of the premature baby.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's where you can go. You can hear stories like that on my website. You can read the testimonials. I've worked with over 1,000 people over the years. I've been doing this about 25 years. And oh my God, I would love to do just a complimentary reading for both of you, because both of you, I will just tell you this, you got some peeps around you.
That would be.
I felt it yesterday strongly. I have to tell you that. Yesterday I felt it strongly, but yes, we do. Chris, we're so grateful you came on our show today. Thank you so much. You've given our listeners so many tools and ideas on top of just amazing storytelling. And I can just say for both of us, we're in the process of finishing your book and can't put it down. It's an amazing book. It's so well written.
Very well written.
Yes. The stories are phenomenal and we know they're true and they're mind-boggling at the same time. And it is eye-opening as well. And just so appreciative, just truly appreciative that you were that vulnerable and authentic with your story so that others might benefit from it. So thank you.
Yeah, it definitely couldn't have been easy telling that story. So yeah, thank you from everybody.
Well, I am so blessed to meet both of you. You're both gifted off the scales. Thank you both so much.
Thank you very much. Okay.